I'm Jackie.
And I'm Ashley.
And this is Red Rum and Rosé.
Woohoo!
Today, it's early in the morning, so we're drinking mimosas.
Ayo, La Marca prosecco. I almost called it La Marca.
It's my favorite, so I do like it and highly recommend.
Mm-hmm.
So today, our storyteller will be my boyfriend, Ben. And we also have Bezhou as a guest audience.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
To our super professional and highly listened to podcast.
I'm excited.
We got 11 listens last time.
Ayo.
Don't know how many of
Alright.
those were us playing them.
One from me. That's it.
I just want to say it's a real honor to be invited to this podcast, and I will never forget you guys.
Yes. I was too nervous to come by myself, so I had to invite Bezhou. He's like my
Security
my
blanket?
support group of one. So today I wanted to talk about one of America's most notorious serial killers, Joseph DeAngelo. Up until his capture, he went by the nickname the Golden State Killer.
Ooh-wee.
Have you guys heard of him before?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah?
Only on the news.
Oh, okay. Do you know anything about him, Ashley?
I know that he pretty much got away with murder for super, super, super long, right? And didn't he used to rape women as well?
Yeah, that's true. He got away with rape and murder for a very long time. And we'll kind of go into this piece by piece. Due to his prolific crimes and his various crime sprees across California, they weren't all connected at first. And he went by many different nicknames because they didn't know they were the same person. So you may have heard of one of these. He went by the East Area Rapist. He went by the original Night Stalker, the Diamond Knot Killer, and the Visalia Ransacker. So for this, we're going to begin at the beginning. It's in the middle of California. Well, not like kind of in the middle, but exactly in the middle.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Like if I gave you a picture of the
Really?
state of
Yeah.
California and told you to point to where you think the middle is, your finger would be covering the homes of 100,000 folks who reside in Visalia. And in the mid-1970s, one of those would be Joseph DeAngelo. So the Visalia Ransacker was the nickname they gave DeAngelo. Of course, no one knew it was DeAngelo. He kept his identity hidden and remained uncaught for all 120 of his crimes.
Holy
And this is just 120 crimes within Visalia.
What?
Yeah, it's just Visalia.
Holy moly.
These crimes were petty crimes, burglaries, for the most part. The first recorded ransacking was on March 19th, 1974. $50 of coins was stolen from a piggy bank. This is where DeAngelo kind of started his career as a criminal. The strange thing was, he would ignore higher valued items, even if they were in plain sight.
What?
Most of his activities involved breaking into houses, rifling through or vandalizing the owner's possessions, scattering women's underclothes, and stealing a range of low-value items.
Is that why they call it ransacking instead of robbery? Because he would just go in and mess things up?
Yeah.
Oh, good eye.
Interesting.
Good eye.
Good eye.
Good ear?
Oh yeah, he's listening.
You know what I
my
mean.
script?
Yeah.
I think a ransacker would be the worst because they didn't take anything and then you just have to clean up. So they took your time, which
Or
is
like,
priceless.
what if like you just think that they took something, but you just don't know what they took? You know, that would bug me.
Oh, then it wasn't important.
Yeah, it's funny.
The Visalia Police Department, along with the Tulare County Sheriff's Office and California Highway Patrol, investigated and slowly pieced together all of the reported incidents. Some incidents were not immediately reported given their trivial nature, for example, stealing coins from a piggy bank, or because nothing of value seemed to be taken, like he said. However, the focus on girls' photos or women's clothing, the deliberate ransacking behavior, or the theft of one of a pair of items, the police were suspicious that a darker motive was at play. Given the number of high school students targeted in incidents, the location of the crimes around a college, investigators actually suspected a student may have been involved. So 21 of the 37 main suspects listed by police by the late 1975 were teens. There are a couple of unique details that linked these burglaries together. So for example, he had size 9 Converse shoes, and there are pry marks kind of specific pry marks on windows and doors. And despite physical analysis of crime scenes and despite the unusual presence of the use of hand lotions, no sign of masturbation discharge was detected.
It's like really uncomfortable though, like
Yeah.
knowing that he's like sitting there.
It almost sounds like he would break into this house, find the lotion, jack off but not finish, maybe steal some coins, and then be on his way.
Man,
Oh my God.
What a criminal.
Yeah.
The ransacker was described as young, Caucasian, male, around 5'10" and 180 to 200 pounds. So he was actually physically fit and able to run scale fences with relative ease. He also appeared to be left-handed and skilled with using weapons. And we'll get to some of that later. What's interesting is 120 crimes, and he was never captured. They just knew him as the Visalia ransacker.
So, and how old was he again during these crimes? Do we know?
He would be, I would have to do the math, but I think he was in his 30s.
Wow.
Jeez.
That's older than I was expecting.
Yeah.
When he was stealing from pay banks?
Yes,
In
to begin
Visalia.
with.
That's weird.
Mm.
Yeah, I would have thought like maybe in his 20s, because he's a really old man now too. So like, but I guess that's what a long time ago. Jeez.
I think he's 73 now.
Ugh.
And then like people saw him running away from the house. Like that's how they got the descriptions.
Yeah, well, he mostly wore ski mask, and so the descriptions were more from what they could see from the cutouts of the ski mask, and so that's why it's like they know he's Caucasian. He would talk through gritted teeth, so they knew he was a male. And then it was just general weight, height. People did see him like scaling fences.
Mm.
And after a spree of about 18 months, the crimes took a darker turn.
Uh-oh.
On September 11th, 1975. This is the day D'Angelo broke into Claude Snelling's house. Claude is a journalism professor, and he has a wife and daughter. And Claude arrived home one night to find a prowler at his daughter's window.
Oh hell no.
Yikes.
He chased after the man, but lost him in the darkness. So this is one of those scenarios you're talking about where they see him, but they don't necessarily see his face.
Mm.
The only description that Claude was able to give was that the prowler was a white male between 5'10", 6 foot tall, had collar-length hair, and that he was wearing dark plaid long-sleeve shirt. The police checked the yard, and under the girl's window, they identified shoe prints. Any guess what kind of shoe prints they were?
Like Converse.
Yep,
Size 9?
size 9.
Oh man.
What is not commonly known is that the professor's daughter had also seen the Visalia ransacker before. She and her boyfriend were sitting in a room talking about the Visalia ransacker when her boyfriend asked her what she would do if she were to open her window blinds and see him standing outside. Her response was to pull open the window shade. Outside, a man looking at her.
Oh hell freaking no. Are you kidding me? This is not real.
Spooky, right?
Like what a coincidence,
Yeah,
like at that moment.
Stranger than fiction.
I probably would have peed myself.
TMI.
Like, could you imagine though, talking something scary like that at night and just like open your blinds and some fucking person is just standing there?
Kidding.
God, I'd have a heart attack.
So one night, same house, D'Angelo entered the home through an open window. He was wearing a ski mask. He entered the bedroom of Claude's daughters, Beth Snelling, and struck her and warned her not to scream out or he would stab her. Claude, awakened by his daughter's moaning, rushed to the back door and found the prowler leading Beth away.
Oh.
The intruder, D'Angelo, wheeled quickly and fired twice at Claude at close range. He released Beth, who began screaming, and dashed through the side gate along the driveway. Claude, mortally wounded, turned to cut off the burglar in the front yard but collapsed at the front door. So this was the first time D'Angelo murdered someone.
Wow.
Poor guy.
Thanks.
Beth was a cheerleader at Mount Whitney High School. She was traumatized by the attack, understandably, and volunteered to undergo hypnosis to see if any details about the incident would emerge from her subconscious. So Detective William McGowan drove Beth to the police department. I'm going to say that sentence again. Detective William McGowan drove Beth to the police department where she would be hypnotized. I actually looked up a bit about hypnotism
Mhm.
when I was reading this. Yeah, and it's not where you put someone in a trance and then you can control them.
Mhm.
It's more of being put into a sleepy state where you can focus better. At least that's the idea behind it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm in a sleepy state, I can't focus at all.
Same.
I
Like,
almost got hypnotized
really?
in college.
What?
Whoa.
So
That would have been cool.
So a hypnotist came to school, and it was just like, okay, everybody in the room, close your eyes. Now imagine yourself on a beach, something simple, right? So you imagine yourself on the beach. And it's like, don't open your eyes. Now imagine that you're climbing a mountain and you feel the breeze, and so you're doing that, and then it starts being like, okay, now lift your arms up, and if you're really just like focusing on what the person's saying and what and nothing else, you don't open your eyes. But I lifted my arms up, and then I was like, I wonder if anybody's lifting their arms. And I opened my eyes, and a few of us were, but other people had already opened their eyes because they hadn't given in to like just focusing. And I was like, oh my god. So it is more of just like listening to what that person's talking about, and that's all you're focused on. And so you do all of this stuff thinking that maybe everybody else is doing it too, but really you're the only one. And there were like maybe 6 people who were at the front of the room, and one of them was my friend, and they got her to like sing "Hit Me Baby One More Time."
What?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Do you think
It's
we should get
interesting.
you to do that, Bezhou?
You don't even have to hypnotize me.
Weren't you doing an interview recently, and maybe you were hypnotized to sing a song?
Possibly. Can you refresh my memory about this?
The interviewee had an app.
Oh, yes. This guy had an app that would show you what pitch you were singing. And the only song that he had in this app was Rolling in the Deep by Adele, which is not an easy song at all. And so he puts the app in front of me, and he's like, okay, sing. And I'm like, who's the interviewer here, right? And so I start humming along. Terrible job. I'm not hitting any of the notes correctly. And he's like, oh, it doesn't look like you're in tune. So he keeps pressing buttons on the app to make it easier for me to hit, even though I'm clearly disinterested. And I'm like, can we just move on? And he's like, no. You got to get at least a couple of notes. And
Oh my gosh.
So this goes on for 2 minutes, and finally I'm like, okay, let's go to the next question, please.
So
Oh
strong
my
yes to hire.
Yeah.
I would have to be hypnotized to sing.
I don't know.
Just saying.
We hear you sing all the time. I can't dance.
Let's not talk about that. So Beth wanted to be hypnotized. She was hoping that she would come up with more details to help the investigators. And to some degree it worked. She recalled the events of the evening. Her boyfriend came over to visit. Her air conditioning was not working. She had heard a noise from outside her bedroom window where her boyfriend arrived, but she looked out and she didn't see anything. So I don't know about you guys, but if I had seen a man outside my window prior, and my dad had seen a person outside my window prior to that, and I heard a noise outside, even if I didn't see anything, to me, that's a red flag. That's an alarm. I don't know if I would still be able to sleep that night without doing like a little, maybe calling the cops.
Pulling
to
an
check.
Ashley.
And well,
Yeah.
but also it's like, why would they fall asleep with their window open too? Like that's just such easy access. You know, like I always make sure that my windows
Wait,
are
did we
closed
say
and
the
locked.
window was open?
Yeah.
There was an open
Oh.
window.
Oh, missed that.
Yeah. So it's like if anything like that was happening, I mean, even nothing like that has ever happened to me, but I still make sure all my windows are closed and locked because I would rather not deal with that.
Was it
But
like
did,
air conditioning, maybe?
oh yeah, if
Or-
the air conditioning was broken.
I don't even
And
have an
actually,
air conditioner.
D'Angelo was known, one of his MOs was he would break the air conditioning on purpose of the houses she was going to attack.
Whoa, that's smart.
Wow.
Not just
Son of a
because of the windows, but because he wanted to be able to hear everything inside the house.
Dang,
So he wanted it quiet.
it's kind of smart.
Yeah. He's a smart guy, apparently. He got away with it for so long.
FBI profiler Roy Hazelwood talks about the paradox of the smart rapist in his book, The Evil That Men Do. And it's, rape, torture is something we tend to not contribute to intelligence. And yet the D'Angelo was very smart about everything he did, very meticulous. So Beth was being hypnotized, and she remembered her boyfriend coming over around 10. He came over before 10 but left around 10, and then she went to bed around 10:30. And then she woke up with D'Angelo laying on top of her. She thought it was a joke by her younger brother Eric. D'Angelo was covering her mouth and nose with his hand, and his face was covered by a black ski mask. At this point, Beth realized it wasn't a joke. And she remembered his hand on her face and his hand on her other arm were damp, as though he was perspiring slightly.
Oh, God. That's so gross.
He had short and stubby fingers, and he said, "Don't scream or I'll stab you."
Thanks.
Then Beth remembers the suspect standing up and pulling his gun out with his left hand. "You're coming with me, don't scream or I'll shoot." And Beth was able to guess his hair color based on seeing his eyebrows, as well as his height and approximate age of 25 to 30. And after this, the police had to escalate their efforts. So the Visalia Police Department committed more resources to apprehending the ransacker, and a $4,000 reward was posted. Because remember, he shot someone at this point, so he's now a murderer. He's not just breaking into homes, he's killing people. Nighttime stakeouts were set up near homes that he had previously prowled, but the ransackings continued. Around 8:30 p.m. on December 12th, 1975, a masked man entered the backyard of a house near where the ransacker had been reported to frequent. And Detective William McGowan, the same guy who drove Beth to the police station, was on a stakeout inside the garage.
Oh my gosh.
And he attempted to detain D'Angelo, but D'Angelo shrieked.
Shrieked?
Yeah, he shrieked. And removed his mask
What?
and feigned surrender
Oh.
after McGowan fired a warning shot.
Huh.
Right? So you would think, this is it, they got him.
That's the end of it.
However, he then jumped the fence to the house, pulled out a revolver with his left hand, and fired once near McGowan's face, shattering his flashlight.
Whoa.
Damn.
And nearby officers rushed to aid McGowan, and D'Angelo was able to escape.
Wow.
But he saw his face, so now he can give a better composite.
There were
right?
some sketches, they didn't seem to help.
Oh, jeez.
And D'Angelo also fled Visalia at this point, leaving behind fearful neighborhoods
Yikes.
and a bewildered police force.
Wow.
Rancho Cordova.
I've heard of that place.
It's a city near the Eastern District of Sacramento County. And in 1976, and if you remember the previous scenario took place in 1975, so in 1976, this is where D'Angelo would commit his first known rape. His victim was a young woman, and he snuck into her home in the middle of the night and raped her. And within a month, he would rape again, this time a teenage girl.
Ooh, sick mother.
Yikes.
D'Angelo was no longer interested in just burglarizing homes. He had upped his ante. So that August 1976, Jane Carson Sandler had been enjoying her life with her son Paul and her husband Bill. She had no idea that her life would be devastated, nor did she know there was a good chance, while she and Bill went through their days that summer and early fall eating out, spending time at home, the park, movies, enjoying the routines of life, that a budding serial rapist and murderer was watching them, stalking the neighborhood in which they lived. Not that the Sacramento area during the 1970s was exclusively for the rich. Jane would describe it as fairly nice. She would say, nothing necessarily fancy. It wasn't a gated community, and it definitely wasn't the city either. The thing is, you drive around some of these neighborhoods in Northern California, in and out of the suburban sprawls, staring at those carefully and meticulously manicured lawns and parks, bike paths, kids playing outside, and you can't help but think, like, what could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
But that one morning, October 5th, 1976, when Bill drove away from this home and Jane was half asleep, it was approximately 6:30 in the morning. She just heard her husband, Bill, leave for work. That familiar sound of the garage door opening and closing, and Paul, their son, was 3 years old. And just as the garage door was closing and Bill backed out of the driveway, Paul came running down the hallway with his little pit-pat footsteps and jumped into his mother's bed to cuddle. And the pit-pat footsteps, it reminds me of our dog Bliss, because we always wake up in the morning to him kind of... It doesn't sound quite like that. So Jane opened her eyes to Paul, who woke her up, and she saw a slight flash of light down the hallway that led to her bedroom.
Oh, God.
And she wondered, what is that? It was just after this when Jane heard someone running down the same hallway toward her bedroom.
I'm getting freaked out right now.
What did Bill forget now, Jane thought. And with Paul by her side, Jane jumped up and looked down the hallway. And she was staring at a masked man holding a knife. He had gotten into the home without Jane's husband seeing him. He had actually snuck through the garage door as Bill was pulling out.
Are you serious?
So you can imagine he timed it with the opening and closing of the garage door.
Wow.
And D'Angelo had said to Jane, "I just want your money," holding the knife to her chest. And it was somewhat of a relief for Jane to hear this, because it's like maybe he just wants to rob me and get out of there. But he wasn't there for her money. And what he did was he tore the sheets off the bed and ripped them into these strips in order to tie her up and blindfold her. So he actually used their bed sheets to tie her up. And this is actually something that he did before. It wasn't his first time. And it's something that he would continue to do. It was one of his MOs. And as Jane sat tied up and blindfolded on her bed, all she could do now was wonder why the room was so quiet. She sat there wondering if he took her boy. He had been silent for so long, she began to wonder where he had gone. And as Jane wondered what would happen next, he stepped over near the bed and began to untie the restraints on her legs. And she knew what he was about to do next. Jane was the 5th rape victim, and she actually was reported later to say, "I was fortunate that was number 5, because after my rape, he became much more aggressive in his tactics, much more abusive." And no one knew at the time that the Visalia ransacker was the same man committing this series of rapes. They gave D'Angelo a new nickname, the East Area Rapist. So this is what the police department knew about the East Area Rapist. He attacked girls in their bedrooms. He was in the East Sacramento County. He was athletic and young. And again, they don't have the same description from the Visalia ransacker because they don't think it's the same guy. So they have his age 18 to 30. They have him always wearing a mask, usually targeted a single-story house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. And strangely enough, the home would most of the time be the second house from the corner. And I think that has something to do with quick getaway, but not being on the corner. And D'Angelo was also smart and precise, as we talked about earlier. He would enter a home beforehand. Before attacking, he would actually break in and study family pictures, learn the layout of the house. He would disable porch lights, unlock doors. He would empty bullets from guns.
Whoa.
He's
Dude,
very smart about
what
this.
Preparing
Oh
for
my
this.
gosh.
What happened to Jane's son?
Yeah, what happened to Paul?
So after he raped her, he actually had put the son on the floor, and he just put him back on the bed next to her.
Whoa.
And
And
the kid was just quiet?
And the kid was just quiet. He was actually asleep.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, the kid slept through the whole thing.
Well, thank God for the kid, man,
Yeah.
because that would have been traumatizing
Mm-hmm.
for him, at least.
Jane, there's a whole book about Jane's experience. She was very helpful. So at this point, I guess this is a good transition. I want to introduce you to Carol Daly. And Carol was one of the first female detectives in Sacramento. And she talked a lot with Jane. And in 1968, before she was a detective, she worked as a secretary at the Sacramento County Coroner. And her husband was the one who showed her the job listing for female deputies. And back then it was like a separate classification and process for female deputies. And Carol decided to apply. And among those who applied, 35 women took the test, only 12 passed, and only 6 were hired. And there wasn't a clear career path like there was for men to become a detective. So like men would do stints in jails and on patrols, and then they could apply to be a detective. But Carol buckled down and did the work necessary. And as she worked up the ranks, she took on the East Area Rapist case in 1976, and she responded to Jane's rape. Carol, along with other investigators, realized they might have a serial predator on their hands. they're starting to tie all of these rapes together. And by the time the 7th and 8th rapes were reported, the department realized there needed to be a task force. There were about 40 or 50 people on the team, but Carol's experience interviewing victims made her the natural choice to talk to women that were raped. Jane divulged some of the stranger things D'Angelo did. He took out a bottle of lubricant and began to masturbate, then kneeled in back of Jane as she lay on her stomach. Her hands were bound behind her back and her mouth gagged, and he made Jane, with her hands completely bound, masturbate him. It was at this moment she realized how abnormally small he was.
Damn.
His
What a
penis
blow.
was the size of a button mushroom.
No
Whoa.
freaking way.
Penis.
Wow.
Oh, you know what? He deserves that.
But maybe it was the
Causation
micropenis that
there.
turned him into that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anger.
Oh.
Yeah, some speculate that his previous relationships, he was angry about how they turned out, and that might be some of what led him to who he became. Some people describe him as a very angry person. So, yeah, there might be something to it. Of course, not everyone who has sexual issues becomes a rapist, but I wouldn't be surprised if most rapists have sexual issues. So one might expect a rapist to finish and leave. And after violating Jane, he went into the kitchen and opened the fridge. And Jane could hear him rummaging through the cabinets, clanging pots and pans, moving dishes around. We don't know exactly what he was doing, but we think he was cooking.
I needed a snack after burning all those calories.
Yeah. I mean, it's really quite strange that he could do this, and then he probably knew Bill wasn't coming home anytime soon. So he probably thought, I can stay around, cook some food, don't have to buy groceries then. So it was exactly this kind of strange behavior that made it easy to tie the rapes together to a single perpetrator. And so it was the case that the Sacramento police force back then, they didn't want to release these details quite yet to the public, that there was a serial rapist, because they didn't want the public to freak out.
Were they aware of the Visalia incidents as well at that time, or was this to them separate?
So I don't know if people in the force knew about the Visalia ransacker, but they definitely didn't think about tying it together. And they weren't sharing information either.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why he was able to, well, first of all, being intelligent about how he attacked homes helped him avoid getting caught, but also because he moved around a lot. He was able to, and those different departments didn't communicate about the crimes, he was able to avoid getting caught. There was one attack, it was a 17-year-old girl, and she was just returning home one night to pick up some clothes. And there was no one else inside the house. And she walked in, and there he was, wearing a ski mask, dressed in all black, waiting for her inside her own home. And he had entered the house before she had, and he seemed to know that she was going to return at some point that night, even though she wasn't staying the night. And each attack, the descriptions gave the same details. He was between 25 and 35 years of age, white, clean-shaven face, with dark, neatly cut hair. Although I don't know how they knew he was cleanly shaven if he always wore a ski mask.
I don't know.
That's interesting. And all of the attacks occurred between 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. The age range of the victims didn't bother him. Victims had been as young as 16 and up to their 40s. The 16-year-old girl was home alone when she was attacked by D'Angelo. Before the attack, she had picked up the phone to dial a friend. The call had rung 1.5 times when a man in a ski mask emerged from her parents' bedroom with a hatchet.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
I was wondering how you would react to these stories, Ashley.
Yeah, well,
It's
I'm
like
just like,
Ashley's worst nightmare.
it really is my worst nightmare. Like, I'm so scared that one day I'm just gonna come home and someone's just gonna be there waiting for me.
Well, these stories remind me of like why I stopped leaving the door open when I walked the dog, because I always think about when I'm walking up the stairs, like, what would I do if I opened the door and somebody was just standing in there waiting for me? Because I
Yeah.
always leave it unlocked when I leave.
Yeah.
So I started locking the door.
Yeah.
And I think there was one time where you came back in and I was
And
standing
you were there. Yeah, so
Oh.
I was so scared because I
Wow.
happened. Well, what I noticed when I walked up that particular day was the door was like more closed than I had left it, and I was like, the door looks different than how I leave it propped, but the wind could have closed it. You know, all of like jumping to more rational thoughts than irrational, and then I walk in and Ben's standing there, and I was just so scared. All I was thinking about was like, oh, how funny would it be if I walked in and somebody was there?
Oh, totally
Not funny, but yeah.
What a hoot.
So this teenage girl, I guess it's kind of a rough transition.
Anywho.
I actually, reading through this and doing the research, got more freaked out about these kind of things because even though it's like getting struck by lightning, it's you start to realize that these are just normal people who have no idea that tragedy is going to strike them, and so you start to think, oh, maybe it can happen to me. So this one girl, and by the way, a lot of the names in this story are not their real names. They changed their names for their safety, and a lot of the names aren't released because when you're a rape victim, you don't release the names. And so this 16-year-old girl who watched this man emerge from her parents' bedroom managed to get a decent look at D'Angelo. And the detective, Carol, was hopeful that she may be able to positively identify him if he was a local. And so she brought the girl a yearbook, a 1974 Folsom High School yearbook. And this girl pointed to a boy's picture. And she said, that looks most like him. And this boy she pointed to, most people described him as weird. He worked at a gas station, and they thought maybe this is the man. So Carol and the victim pulled up to the gas station in an unmarked car with tinted windows. They were almost 3 feet away from this guy. And the girl could not make a positive identification. So no arrests were made. And I think Carol made the right decision, because this boy wasn't the East Area rapist, and D'Angelo was still on the loose. And after patrol deputies responded to these crime scenes, Carol would come and take each woman to the hospital for the rape exam and interview them. She interviewed every single woman tied to the case in her jurisdiction, which was 36 women.
Holy moly.
Yikes.
The attacks were long, sometimes taking 2 to 3 hours. Carol was the first woman in the department to rise to the rank of undersheriff for Sacramento County before retiring in 2001. And in the course of her work on the East Area rapist case, she helped standardize rape kits.
Get it, girl.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Mm.
She would also help with make sure that the doctors knew what to look for. And one of the newer methods Carol used to try and track down D'Angelo was something called iodine silver plate transfer method. Bezhou, you know all about that, right?
Oh yeah, you just put the iodine on a silver plate and transfer it.
I would be surprised if that's a part of it. And with the iodine silver plate transfer method, you can actually get latent fingerprints from human skin to be developed.
Whoa.
And try to find a match.
Whoa.
Now, this process, so Carol would blow a fine powder over the bodies of the victims, but this process isn't great because human skin grows, grabbed violently during an attack, or you can be grabbed by people after the attack. So it's very unlikely to get a great fingerprint, but it's one of the techniques they use to try and track him down. Unfortunately, it didn't work. And D'Angelo was able to keep evading detection. And detectives tried to eliminate suspects quickly. They looked at things like big feet, because remember he wore size 9 shoes, although that was in Visalia, but I'm sure they saw the same 9-foot shoe. 9 foot.
Whoa.
That'd be a big
That's-
foot.
You can eliminate a lot of suspects.
Size 9 shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's US, I guess US 9?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It'd be really tiny feet if it was UK 9.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, they would eliminate people if they had a pot belly or a sunken chest. So they were looking for a fit man, average height, and not big feet. Lieutenant Larry Crompton from the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department had talked to a psychiatrist about the East Area Rapist. And she said she talked to her sex offenders at the prison, and all of them said, you had better catch him fast. And Larry Crompton asked why. And she said, because he wants to kill.
Well, how would he know? Or how would they know? I mean...
Profilers.
Yeah, I think it's all about the profile that you build from his...
And because it was escalating.
Oh, yeah.
It was getting more violent.
So, do we know if he ever had a criminal history before this? Like, had he ever been arrested prior to any of this happening?
The only arrest he's had prior to his arrest for all of these crimes was unrelated to these crimes.
Because you would think, like, if he had been arrested, they'd take your fingerprints, right? And then they would have all these fingerprints.
I think back then the fingerprint database wasn't that great.
I guess
Same
it
with
was
sharing information.
pretty old, huh?
That's why they
70s.
didn't tie it to the Visalia. Because nowadays it's a lot better.
DNA on everything!
I think
Yeah.
they just had Excel spreadsheets with thumbnails of fingerprints.
Probably.
Gotta use the old eye.
And then they hire interns to do a comparison. Here's a fingerprint. And they're like, row 90?
Speaking of profiling, was the FBI brought in at any point during this, or are they still keeping it local?
Yeah, I don't think the FBI was brought in. I didn't read anything about the FBI.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there was a pattern to the rapes that emerged right away. Larry Crompton focused on this because it said a lot about who this guy was and the psychology behind his crimes, which is what you guys are talking about with his profile. And some of those examples are tying people up and then going to the kitchen to eat.
So freaking weird. Sorry.
And most of the time he would have the victims masturbate him while they lie on their stomachs with their hands tied behind their backs. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Department asked the news media not to report the rapes so that they could have a crack at catching him without the public going into stage 4 panic, which is what we talked about earlier. And this was around the 5th or 6th rape. And after raping Jane, D'Angelo would strike twice in one day on the opposite sides of the same community. Twice in one day.
Getting cocky.
Yeah. By then, the sheriff's department could not hold on to the secret any longer. They needed vigilance and a neighborhood watch type of help. So what they're thinking is, if the community knows, they might be in panic, but then we might actually catch the guy. We can't just be silent and let him continue to rape. They also started eating into their budget. They had helicopters flying over at night with spotlights flashing into people's backyards. And Sacramento was in a panic state. The hardware stores were sold out of security devices. Everybody was talking about the East Area Rapist. Rape after rape occurred without this guy being seen by anybody else but his victims. In one single 24-hour period, the Sacramento Police Department received 6,169 calls.
Holy.
Almost all of them about the East Area Rapist.
What?
The sheriff's department, yeah, I know, it's insane, right?
Yeah.
In 24 hours.
Jesus.
I mean,
Yeah.
what is the math on that? Like, how many phone calls is that
Like,
every minute?
Constantly ringing.
Yeah. And what percentage of those are like truthful calls, and do they know like?
Yeah, so that's a good point because, well, if you're calling to report an incident, yeah, it might just be like a false positive.
Yeah.
Like you think you saw someone,
Yeah.
or everyone's spooked.
Right.
The sheriff department also received 3 different phone calls, where a man on the phone would say, "I'm the East Area Rapist," and then like laugh and hang up. And on the last call, he proclaimed, "You can't catch me."
Wow.
Which makes me think that maybe, like you were saying about false phone calls, maybe that wasn't him. I don't think it was him. I don't think he would call the police department. He seemed more... Well, he seemed smarter than that. So he would attack in the middle of the night, and he would sneak inside a home stealthily without anyone knowing or hearing him. And he seemed to enjoy the terror he caused more than anything else. And so the neighborhoods were set up to guard against him. And he would still slip in and slip out. He would use dirt roads, trails, riverbeds, bike paths, sidewalks, any means he chose to escape. And he would always get away. The first 8 rapes he committed in the Rancho Cordova, Citrus Heights, Del Deo neighborhoods of California happened with a news blackout in place. And Jane's case was one of those. She was number 5. And they had hoped to catch this D'Angelo quickly. And within these 8 rapes, there had been, or so it seemed, there had been no systematic or coordinated effort on his part to create a pattern besides the region. The rapes took place on Mondays, Saturdays, a Sunday, a Friday, a Tuesday. He basically would strike when he felt like it, and mostly in the middle of the night. The only pattern really was his MO of using the bed sheets or eating in the kitchen. D'Angelo also liked to sodomize his victims and then make them give him oral sex.
Ew.
In many cases, he would stick around and sexually assault the victims several times. He often referred to his victims as bitch or motherfucker. He'd ask several times where they kept their money and expensive jewelry, yet rarely took anything of value from their homes. He did, however, like to take food or beer from the fridge with him.
The important things.
And the one piece of evidence he left behind at just about every crime scene was DNA, his sperm. So authorities had it. At this time, though, DNA and catching killers were not part of the same sentence. So law enforcement had his DNA and could connect each case to using the DNA. They're like, this is the same DNA here and there. But it didn't help solve the crimes. During the first string of attacks, police noted that D'Angelo never attacked while a man was in the house, although there had been children. The Sacramento Bee published an article that mentioned he only attacked women who were alone. And you would think this might make women feel safer if they have a man with them. D'Angelo then almost immediately started attacking couples.
Oh, jeez.
Whoa.
This was proof he was probably listening or watching his own press.
Wow.
When Detective Carroll had helped lead a packed town hall on the East Area rapist, a man stood up and criticized the investigation. He even said, "I dare the East Area rapist to attack my family."
What an idiot.
Wow.
6 months later, the East Area rapist attacked this man, raped his wife, and got away with it.
I've been so pissed.
Divorce right
Right?
away.
Be like,
Yep.
Yeah.
you told him to freaking come here and rape me, you asshole.
I'm surprised his wife stayed with him.
Yeah.
No.
Man.
Wow.
Yeah, couples became the main focus of his attacks. He attacked couples 11 times in a row. Just think about that for a second. 11 times.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I can't fathom. I mean, this guy had guts.
Yeah, well, so during this time in Sacramento, there hadn't been anyone who had been murdered, though, just in Visalia, right? Just that one guy in Visalia.
Just that one guy in Bezhou.
Okay.
And again, they didn't know that was the same person.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, like, if he's going to start murdering people in Sacramento.
Mm. Yeah,
Because, like, how would he subdue the guy, you know?
yeah.
Knock him out.
Yeah.
Tie
Tie
him
him
up.
up.
So during his 19th attack, yeah, I'll actually get into how he would handle the men. And remember, he had a gun,
Yeah.
which helps. During his 19th attack, he shined a flashlight in the couple's faces. That's how he awoke them while they slept in bed. So imagine just suddenly being awoken by...
How do you not wake up by somebody walking into your house?
Wow.
I
Not
know you
everyone is, like, the lightest sleeper in the world.
Jackie wakes up at the slightest sound.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
crazy.
me waking up wakes her up.
Wow.
It could be a
It's like, I
blessing,
heard your eyes
but
open.
also...
It's a
I
good
heard
reference.
your eyelashes
Yeah.
break the
Oh my gosh.
wind or the stale air.
Yeah, it's insane.
So you probably would have been already. I mean, I don't know what you would have done though, because you're such a light sleeper.
Wake
but what?
men up.
I heard a noise. Oh, it's probably just bliss. Go back to bed.
We'll go to sleep with the TV playing
Yeah.
at a decent volume. I'll reach over to grab my phone and wake her up.
Wow.
I don't understand. There must be like light strings attached to my ears. They like pull on our ears or something. So it's pretty freaky thinking about just waking up with a man shining a flashlight in your face, and you can imagine how it'd be kind of you'd be stunned for a second, even though he's not hitting you or anything. And he would hold a gun on them and then tie them up after placing a blanket over their heads. He then ransacked the house, and he'd be there for about 2 hours. and he would take a tiny bit of money from the couple, but not all they had on hand. Very strange behavior. And in addition to that, what he would do is lay the man down and stack plates or cups on their back,
Oh.
and told him that if he moved, which would, make the plates fall, that he would kill everyone. And with his 23rd victim, he made a startling statement. And what he did was, so again, he snuck through a door that he pried open quietly because the windows had been locked. So he somehow knew how to, with a screwdriver or a crowbar, how to get the door open.
Oh, I know how to open a door with a knife.
Wow.
Not a deadbolt, but yeah, like a regular lock on like a.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
or like even if you push it in, because I got funny story. The first time I went to Hawaii, I got locked out of my bedroom, and I went to the kitchen and had to get a butter knife, and I stuck it. Like when you like the crack in the door, and you can see like the lock into. I had to finagle it in there, push it, and then I was able to get in. But I can unlock a door with a butter knife.
All right.
Nice.
So
Not a deadbolt though.
not a deadbolt. No, not a deadbolt.
Are you just pushing the thing? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen, in movies, I see them do it with a credit card.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I don't want to ruin a credit card though.
Yeah, so he probably did something similar to that. It was mostly those sliding glass doors, and he would pry it open with either a screwdriver or a crowbar. And these are actually the pry marks they used in Visalia to connect all of his different ransackings. So he pried the door open of this 23rd victim, and after forcing the woman, by putting a gun to her head, to tie up her husband, he took her to a different part of the home and raped her. It was a different room than the bedroom, which is a new MO for him. And in yet another room was their children, who didn't wake up. And here, in this attack, there was also another man, a friend of the family, sleeping in a guest room, who also didn't wake up.
What? Oh
And-
my gosh.
So D'Angelo at this point was becoming even bolder. He liked the idea of attacking couples with children, but he had now made it clear that it didn't matter if there were 3 adults in the home, 2 of them males. And when he was finished raping this particular woman, he told her, "If there is no press coverage of this, I will kill my next victim." Then he took the husband, got him alone, and he told the husband, "If there is any press coverage of this, I will kill my next victim."
Oh
Whoa.
my god.
What
It's
the
like-
hell?
It's like the jigsaw killer.
Right? Frickin' maniac.
Yeah.
It's so... I'm not sure what the word is, but I want to say manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
but I suppose it's evil to do something like this, to terrorize people, but then also put them in a state of uncertainty and fear, and feel responsible for whoever dies next.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that he did, which is really fucked up, I mean, this is all fucked up, but for example, Jane, who was the 5th rape victim, she would, over the next few years, recover from her, maybe not wholly, but recover mostly from her experience, and then get a phone call from D'Angelo,
Are you kidding
where he
me?
would just be on the phone and be like, "I'm watching you,"
Wow.
just to remind her, to keep her from fully recovering from
How
her
did
rape.
he get her number?
That's a great
Phone
question.
book? She probably never moved,
I would
I'm guessing.
She
I
didn't
would've-
move right away.
I
Yeah,
would've
see,
moved
she didn't move.
and changed my phone number.
Yeah. But maybe it's like one of those situations where she didn't have any money because she bought the house and,
Yeah.
couldn't, Or no one wants to buy a house that someone got raped in, I don't know.
Yeah. The next victim, though, he didn't kill. They did release it to the press, but he didn't kill his next victim. So he did change things up a little bit. He decided to hit the south side of Sacramento City. So remember, he was the East area rapist, so this has all been taking place on the east side. So the victim number 24, he struck for the first time outside of the East residential area, and it was Fiona and Philip's family. The day their family was attacked, Fiona was just doing some chores around the house, took her son Justin to the market to shop for groceries, dropped Justin off at a babysitter's, picked up a paycheck at the library, did more shopping, picked up Justin from the sitters, swam at home for a while in the pool, and at dusk she watered the lawn. No big deal, regular day. Fiona was aware of the rapes, but she wasn't on high alert because he never came to South Sacramento. So around 12:30 a.m., Fiona's husband Philip came home from work from the water treatment plant, and he drank a beer, watched some TV, and then dozed off. A few minutes later, Fiona and Philip woke up and started fooling around. And then a scratching sound from downstairs caught their attention. The sliding door had opened, and a man with a ski mask stepped into their home. He carried a flashlight in his left hand and a .45 pistol in his right hand. And when he saw them, he said, "Lay perfectly still, or I will kill all of you. I will kill you, I will kill her, and I will kill your little boy." So he already knows they have a boy in the other room. And then he stacked plates on Philip's back and led Fiona into the living room. Fiona was 5'2", 110 pounds, a tiny person. The cops finally came to find Fiona still tied up on the floor in her living room at 4 a.m. And Fiona basically said to the cops, "I guess he's in the South Sacramento area now."
Jeez.
Wow.
D'Angelo had never attacked outside of the East Sacramento area before, and he was beginning to branch out. So he was expanding his comfort zone. He was stepping outside an area he had plundered and pillaged for what was 19 straight months. And now he was in an entirely new community, and this entirely new community had reason to fear this man because he was basically causing complete havoc in the Sacramento area of California. It was getting to the point where people felt like fish in a barrel. It was as if there were a sniper roaming the county, picking off his victims at random. And nobody knew when or where he would strike next, and men would stay up all night, gun in hand, guarding their homes. Most serial rapists or serial killers, they typically have a comfort zone, an area that they're intimately familiar with, and where they like to stalk and kill their prey. Jack the Ripper provides the classic example of this. He stalked and killed exclusively in Whitechapel district of London. I suppose Ted Bundy is the counterexample. He did not stay within his comfort zone. And D'Angelo was more like Ted Bundy. He moved around the entire state of California. If there was one thing about the East Area rapists that law enforcement could be certain about, it was to never underestimate what he would do next, or how much he was willing to change up his routine and modify his comfort zones. And then, D'Angelo took a break. But when he returned after a long break, he came back with a vengeance.
Well, how long is this long break?
Yeah, years.
Do we know?
About a year.
Wow. How does someone who's been doing...
longer.
Well, I just don't understand how someone who's doing this so...
Year and a half.
Consistently, like multiple times a week or whatnot, or
tired.
multiple times a day, like to just take a year and a half break.
Goes cold
tired.
turkey, right? Yeah.
So like get them off my back for a bit.
Was he like applying for a new job or something?
Had
Yeah,
family.
well,
Yeah.
he had a family.
Oh,
What?
wow. What?
Oh my god.
He has a wife and 3 daughters.
Oh.
And he was having daughters. He had his second daughter at the end of his criminal career, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Like his last attack was in 1986. And in 1986 is also when he had his second daughter.
Oh.
I mean, I don't believe detectives say that's why he stopped, but you can imagine that there are probably forces outside of all of this that affect when he attacks. And
Yeah, and how do you explain, like, oh yeah, I was gone for 3 hours on a walk? Like,
Yeah.
you can't really say that.
I mean, the manner in which he attacks these homes, being very almost compulsive about it, it takes so much energy and effort. You have to imagine that he probably spent a long time scoping out these homes, learning about the family, learning about when the man leaves to work and comes back home, what they do on the weekends. And so this is almost like a full-time job. And it actually turns out that D'Angelo used to be a cop.
No wonder why he was able to get away with it for so long.
Seriously.
I feel like.
And he's also a
Lucky.
Navy veteran.
Son of a bitch.
So he's been in the military.
Wow.
He was on the police force. And he was on the police force in a town called Exeter in California. And they interviewed, once they caught him and knew who he was, they interviewed the people he worked with. And they said, yeah, we would have never thought he would go on to do this. Which makes me think about some of the people I work with.
Oh, yeah. Same here.
When D'Angelo returned after a long break, he came back with a vengeance. His next crime took place in Galeto, Santa Barbara County, California. 400 miles and 6-hour drive from Sacramento. Pretty far. It was December 30th, 1979, just after Christmas. A Sunday night, arguably about 18 months after his last attack in North California. And neighbors in the area heard several loud bangs and booms coming from a house in a rather secluded suburban neighborhood. The sounds were so abnormal and loud, many people thought it was just fireworks going off, and they didn't think much about it. The other side of this was that no one this far away from Sacramento ever expected the East Area rapist to strike in their hometown. He was known to have committed all of these crimes so far in the north. Nobody in the south had ever really even heard of him. Those sounds of firecrackers going off, however, were actually gunshots. It was D'Angelo firing a shotgun at two new victims, 44-year-old Robert Offerman and 35-year-old Deborah Manning. What investigators later believed was that Offerman somehow managed to escape after being bound at the wrists, and D'Angelo went after him. And when Offerman presented himself as a threat, D'Angelo killed him and then felt the need to kill Manning, sending a direct message that he was not going to take any type of resistance and was not playing around any longer. And regardless of how long it took to connect the case, the same sexual sadist known as the East Area Rapist was now a murderer who would soon become the original Night Stalker. This on top of being one of the most prolific and intelligent rapists ever to work inside the boundary lines of California. So he has a new nickname now.
He has like 3 nicknames now.
Yeah, and none of them are connected.
Wow.
So he's
Jeez.
now known as the original Night Stalker.
So, question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how he's pulling this off now, because he has a family, right? And he's now 400 miles away from originally. Do you think his family had moved with him, and that's why, or like, because how do you finagle that? Like, I'm just gonna go, out of town for the weekend, honey.
Business trip.
See you later.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to finagle it. I don't know if the family moved or if...
Is the word of the day just going to become finagle?
You're welcome.
is it finagle or finagle?
Finagle.
Finagle?
You can finagle the pronunciation a little bit. People still understand.
Yeah, I don't know about the family, if they moved. And maybe they moved.
It just seems interesting, especially if he's going to be there for a while,
Definitely. So the original Night Stalker,
Why original, by the way?
because he predates another California serial killer,
Who they
the
call
Night
him
Stalker.
Oh, what?
Ran out of nicknames.
Yeah, they're not
Ricardo
very
Ramirez.
creative anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
They're like, that was such a good nickname, let's use it again.
The original.
And the double murder of Offerman and Manning probably jarred him because he went quiet and just started burglarizing homes again in Santa Barbara. And then eventually ended up in Ventura County in 1980. And that's where he raped Charlene Smith and murdered her and her husband, Lyman. Couples seem to be his thing now because after the Smith double murder, 5 months later, he murdered Keith Harrington and raped and murdered Harrington's wife, Patrice. He took 6 months off and switched back to his earlier behaviors when in February 1981, he raped and murdered again. 5 months after that, on July 26, 1981, he snuck into a house where 35-year-old Sherry Domingo and 27-year-old boyfriend Gregory Sanchez were house-sitting on the 400 block of Toltec Way in Goleta. Both Cherry and Greg were bludgeoned to death, with Greg also being shot. It was obvious from the autopsy that Greg had gone after the original Night Stalker, D'Angelo, and was shot during the course of trying to save Sherry. And the gunshot was not fatal, but the original Night Stalker had overpowered Greg and beat him to death with a blunt object, as well as Sherry. D'Angelo had made a complete circle with these last 2 murders because the Offerman and Manning murders, where it all started, had taken place just a few blocks away. And D'Angelo's last known victim was teenager Janelle Lisa Cruz, who was raped and murdered on May 4th, 1986, almost 5 years after the Sanchez Domingo murders. And Janelle lived with her parents 1 mile from Manula, Withern. And it all abruptly and conclusively ended. The original Night Stalker disappeared and never, as far as law enforcement could tell, struck again. Just like that.
How old was the last victim? Does it say? Because
It
she
doesn't say.
lived with her parents. So he never killed any children, just
Janelle was a
adults.
teenager. I don't know how old exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we know that he raped as young as 16. And he murdered mostly couples. It seemed like mostly couples that lived together.
Mm-hmm.
So the teenager might have been an edge case, or I guess you could say an outlier in that case. There's a man named Larry Crompton who wrote a book about the involvement in the East Area Rapist case titled Sudden Terror. And he thinks that the original Night Stalker or the East Area Rapist was perhaps paralyzed in an accident, or some sort of health reason prevented him from continuing his reign of terror, which wasn't the case. D'Angelo was actually just living his life as a husband and father. Like I said, around this time he had his second daughter. And Sharon Huddle was his wife. They were married in Sacramento in 1973 before even his crimes that gave him the name the Visalia Ransacker had occurred. So they were married from very early on. They were, air quotes, divorced in 1991. I use air quotes because technically they're still married.
They're just
But
separated.
estranged, I guess.
Oh, I see.
One of D'Angelo's daughters is a doctor in the Midwest. Another of his daughters is a PhD candidate at a university. And the latter daughter is a graduate teaching assistant.
Wow.
Wow.
Pretty successful for the most part,
I can't even imagine, like,
relatively.
finding out, though, once you're older, like, that your father did all these crimes, you know?
Seriously, yeah.
Like, I can't even fathom, like, what they went through discovering all that.
Yeah, one of them went into shock, basically, and couldn't believe it.
It's a pretty natural reaction, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't suspect much other reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've kept the daughters out of the media, and their names are pretty much kept out of the media too.
That's good.
And I can imagine the media being pretty respectful here, because you don't want to rain down upon a family just because their dad was a terrible person. D'Angelo's 73 years old now, and he's being held without bail in the Sacramento County Jail, which is where Ashley's going to be moving to.
Yeah.
Really?
Visit him.
I'm
Even
going to
without
Sacramento.
husband.
This is going to be great, guys. This is like a great story to hear before I move to Sacramento.
But they did catch him.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
Maybe they got the wrong guy.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, so how did they catch him?
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he was finally caught for his crimes in 2018. This is
Wow, last
super
year.
recent.
Yeah.
Right? This was
Jeez.
also the first announcement in 2018 connecting the Visalia Ransacker to the East Area Rapist. So if we had done this podcast a year ago, we wouldn't even know who this man was.
Yeah, it was a cool piece.
42 years. That's how long it took for the police to have a breakthrough.
Wow.
42 years he remained uncaught. Because of how these crimes were geographically separated, and because different departments weren't sharing information like we talked about earlier, it didn't become apparent that a single person was responsible until 2018, much later. It took the advancement of DNA analysis
Yes.
and the persistence of a very diligent detective, Larry Poole. Larry Poole worked on this case for 20 years, on the books and off. He's a senior investigator for the Riverside County District Attorney's Office and a retired Orange County Sheriff's investigator. And he had made the DNA end of this case his main focus. And he was utilizing neurotechnology to try and amplify the DNA profile. So the key insight responsible for D'Angelo's arrest came courtesy of the then little-known forensic technique known as genetic genealogy. It's a method where investigators try to link crime scene DNA to DNA from biological relatives in the hopes of generating leads for identifying suspects or remains. You could also use it to try and help identify remains.
I love this. They're doing this a lot now. They've caught a couple people doing this now.
Yeah, I think they've caught dozens.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Actually, it
I'm
might even be
super
more
happy.
at this point.
Yeah, I'm super happy that we finally can do that, you know?
Yeah, there's some controversy around it. The police, they collect, they submit it to these genealogy websites. So, for example, there's these databases called like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, which have over 1 million user profiles each. But many of these come from individuals who upload their genetic data from 23andMe or Ancestry DNA.
I've done that.
So when there's controversy around the privacy issue of this, when you submit your DNA to 23andMe, are you also implicitly giving the police permission to use your DNA to try and solve a crime?
I mean, I'm completely okay with that. Like,
Yeah, same
use
here.
my DNA. If one of my relatives did something that was that horrible, fucking get them, please. Like, come on now.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the big deal is. I can imagine maybe if you were being wrongly convicted, then because your DNA was being used from, or maybe like imagine 23andMe screws up somehow, and they match you to a crime. I don't know. I can see how maybe this could be misused, but largely I'm okay with this too.
Yeah.
So what the police did was they collected decades-old DNA from dozens of the victims and the sperm they had from earlier on. And if you look at the warrants that they had for his arrest, it showed that they connected DNA from crimes in Orange County and Ventura County, and a public DNA database was then used to locate a relative with a familial connection to D'Angelo. And it turns out that the science behind this technique has been around for a while, but the real potential to get hits in these searches has only been made possible by the recent advent of online, easily accessible DNA databases. And I think the fact that people are actually using 23andMe and services like Ancestry DNA, that helps a lot because you're expanding the pool of possible matches. So although D'Angelo is not likely to ever be free again, a lot of crimes D'Angelo is suspected of committing may not be prosecuted. The statute of limitations has expired.
Yeah.
So now that the public knew who he was, it made it more clear as to why he may have been able to avoid detection for so long because of his career as a police officer and Navy veteran. One thought I had at this point was, how did the name Golden State Killer become D'Angelo's infamous nickname?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. It turns out there's an A&E true crime show called Cold Case,
I love that show.
and this was one of the cases that they profiled. And there's a chat board on the A&E website, which I kind of want to check out now. Just chat with random people about crimes, maybe try and solve it. And it's funny because there's people all across the country that are trying to figure this out. And one of those people was Los Angeles Magazine writer Michelle McNamara. I hope I'm not butchering that name.
McNamara, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know.
I'll let you say it.
Anyway.
But she's the one who came up with the phrase Golden State Killer. And this was around 2011, so they still hadn't caught him yet. But they were starting to link together the multiple crimes. And so Michelle was an American true crime author. She was also the author of I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer. So she's written a book about this.
Dang.
And it's now been adapted into an HBO documentary series.
Oh,
What?
nice.
Whoa.
I want to watch that.
What is
So
it
I think we
called?
should all
Yeah,
watch it
that's-
later. We'll have to look it up. Maybe it's
Yes.
called I'll Be Gone in the Dark,
Maybe.
if it's named after a book.
Maybe.
So a serial killer, a rapist, a burglar committed at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries in California from 1974 to 1986. Believed to be responsible for at least 3 crime sprees throughout California, each of which spawned a different nickname in the press before it became evident that they were committed by the same person. This is who D'Angelo is. This is the Golden State Killer.
And I've seen, like, I remember him getting arrested last year, and, like, I saw the picture of him, and I'm like, Oh God! Like, because he just looks creepy. Like he's just like, because it wasn't even a wheelchair too. Like he's like super fat and like old white dude like in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like, just he looked like a creep. Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And like I feel like the 70s and 80s were such a like big time for like serial killers like him. You know?
Yeah, it's like where all the really well-known ones are.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's
operating.
harder to get away with things now.
Yeah, because DNA is on everything.
I mean, drones that identify you.
Yeah, facial
Yeah.
recognition cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, thank goodness. I don't know like how I could survive in a time where it's that easy just to get away from that, you know?
Jackie and I were just listening to a true crime story about a lady, and I forget her name. She was committing crimes in England, and they had identified her license plate number because someone reported it.
Mm.
And in England, what they can do is, because they have CCTV cameras all along their freeways and around their cities, they're able to actually get basically a rendering of a map of where the car was live as it drove through cameras that
Oh
were
my
able to read the
gosh.
license plate. So they just put a license plate into the system, and then they can pop up and see where the car is. They can locate
That's
the car.
awesome. So wait, so we don't have that though here, huh?
No.
No, because we don't like Big Brother.
Yeah, it is a bit Orwellian to be able to have that kind of, control over your population.
To a degree.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it's like, I mean, we get so many Amber Alerts and we get so many, like,
then we'd be able to find the car.
exactly,
Or
like,
if somebody kidnaps me and I'm like on the, because now I watch that Panic 911.
such a good show.
And if I know the license plate, I want them to be able to find me.
Exactly. Like, I don't understand. I mean, like, I get it, privacy, whatever. But if you shouldn't have to
Says
worry.
the person who worries that Facebook is listening on her phone.
My mom yesterday actually did the same thing. She's like, why is Royal Canin popping up on my phone? I'm like, well, did you type it in? And she goes, no, they're listening. And I was like, this is where I get my, like,
You get
schizophrenic
everything
from.
from her. All of you are so alike. It's crazy.
I'm like so paranoid because of my mother, you know?
I just want to make it clear, Facebook does not listen to you on your
No,
phone.
it doesn't. I believe you guys. You guys have talked sense into me, but then my mom is in my other ear.
I'm sure you've typed in Royal Canin.
Not on her phone, but yeah.
I know, but you guys. I'm not gonna get into
I'm
it.
on Chewy. It was because of Chewy, and that's why. Yes, we're going off topic, but I'm just saying. I don't know. If you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry about the cameras. You know.
Well, there is kind of a balance between privacy and security. I mean, this is not a new balance we're trying to strike. This is kind of where the Patriot Act invaded a bit, and maybe too much. I don't know what the right balance is, but we don't want another 9/11 to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we also don't want the government to tap all of our phones. But is there a balance there? Do we want cameras on the freeway so we can track those Amber Alerts? The way I see it is, I can't imagine a scenario where my quality of life would be detrimented even in the slightest because of a camera on the freeway. So in that sense, well, now that I said that,
Well, I guess.
what if I'm changing shirts?
What if you're,
Well, at least it's just a shirt.
Yeah, well, that's what they do in England is that they don't speed in the section. They denote the sections that have the CCTVs, and people actually slow down as they go through those sections and then speed up again.
Is it really
Wow.
catching speed too?
Yeah.
Oh, that's annoying. I don't like that.
Okay, why don't we just have cameras that don't detect speed but
Yeah.
just record?
Just keep track.
That's so much like footage.
But that's
Yeah.
probably where the privacy debate has its edge, is that you don't know what the limitations are going to be with the technology, and that's what worries people about it. Is like, yeah, you want it to serve this purpose, but it can now encroach on so much more.
You have to rely on the government to be transparent about
And
what
the
they're
government
doing.
is not transparent ever.
Okay, well that was a good episode.
Yeah.
I'm in England for the next 3 weeks, so
I'll be by
you know what? There's
myself.
always like a 3-week gap or so between these episodes anyway, so
Yeah.
it's not really anything
Sorry.
different.
I don't know
It's
exactly where she
So-
is. Either.
So
What speed she's going.
next
Yeah.
time though, are we still doing the Family Annihilators?
that works.
Family Annihilators next episode. And it's just gonna be us two again.
Yep.
Meh.
All right. Well, bye.
Bye.
You're not gonna say bye to your fans?
God.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I really enjoyed being able to do this. I'm not going to do this a second time.
All I wanted you to do was say bye.
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 And all I wanted you to do was say bye.
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 And